Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. All protocol observed, I would say. Welcome to the second day of the Middle East Tourism Investment Summit, organized jointly by ATM and ITIC. My name is Ibrahim Ayoub, CEO of International Tourism Investment Corporation Limited. And I have with me Nick Nuggle, Marketing Manager of WTM, who will be with me, and both of us who will be your hosts this afternoon. Let me tell you briefly about our organization, which is headquartered in the UK. We have two subsidiaries, Investourism, that structures and facilitates investment in the sector, where we work with public and private project owners and developers to determine the viability and bankability of their projects, and subsequently facilitate and structures investment with the private equity and institutional investors. Whereas our other business, ITIC, delivers annual tourism investment conferences where we have leaders of the travel and tourism and financial services sector, ministers and policymakers. We bring them under one roof to discuss topical issues, challenges, and future trends in sustainable development of the sector. It also provides a platform for project owners and developers to engage with potential investors. Right, so that's a little bit what we do. And with me, Nick Nuggle is going to say a few words now. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Ibrahim. Hello, we are delighted to welcome you here today to this year's summit, the theme of which is the Middle East as a major financial hub for global tourism investments, to discuss with the tourism decision makers and the professionals and investors. And I mean, really, we're here to identify any new opportunities and ensure the sustainable growth and future of our really valued tourism sector. We hope that you'll be captivated by the deeply engaging themes that we raised today, and we feel that they'll change perspectives about the investment possibilities in this financial hub that is the Middle East. So that being said, I hope you'll join me in welcoming virtually Mr. Dr. Taleb Rifai, Chairman of ITIC and former Secretary General of UNWTO.
It gives me great pleasure to welcome you all in Dubai, the world capital when it comes to events now. ATM has become an important fact as well when it comes to tourism. I'm so sorry I will not be there in person this time. It is beyond my control as I'm in Spain now. But thinking of you all in Dubai, let me emphasize the importance of the special partnership with ITIC that has with WTM and REIT in particular. The issue of investment in tourism is of prime importance here. We are at tourism, have been for a long time, talking to each other only, preaching for the convert. For we did not speak to people that matter, the investment and banking people. The investment and banking community as well never understood us. We need to talk, we need to understand each other. The importance of travel and tourism is not to understand or appreciated by many people outside of the industry. It's not understood and appreciated by many people outside the industry. Tourism today is a human activity that has become so vital to sustainability and development across the board. This is why our partnership with REIT becomes very vital and very important, because REIT represents the best in travel and tourism without doubt. Now, my dear friends, I'm here to talk a little bit about tourism and the investment importance of tourism. Tourism has become now a very, very important activity, as I said. 10%, less than 10%, then world jobs are created by travel and tourism. 11% of world GDP is out of tourism. It's a very major industry, but it's very little recognized by many people outside of the industry. It's a very important fact. Now, the banking industry has to understand us much better, because today we can feel the importance of having to deal with the banking industry and the investment people across the board. Today, They don't understand us that well. When a project in tourism is presented to a banking group, they dwell on it. They don't understand it. They think the risk is too high. Well, it may be, but it is very, very beneficial, and it's very, very, very important. COVID-19 has revealed much of our weaknesses in the industry. And it has also highlighted the importance of this industry, because today travel and tourism is much appreciated because it has stopped as a result of COVID-19. This is a very important fact. Today, my dear friends, we're here to meet in Dubai to discuss the importance of travel and tourism and the investment opportunities of travel and tourism. I believe that this is a very important element to be discussed today. I look forward to welcome you all here. Once again, I'm very proud to have the ATM and read with us this morning and this afternoon here in Dubai. Thank you so much, everybody. Thank you for being with us this morning. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Taleb. Thank you very, very much for joining us virtually. So I would now like to welcome Danielle Curtis, Exhibition Director of the Middle East, RX Global.
Well, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to ITIC ATM Middle East Summit. On behalf of Arabian Travel Market Team and our colleagues from the International Tourism and Investment Conference, I would like to thank you all for joining us here today. I hope you've been enjoying yourself so far, with over 1,500 exhibitors, representatives from 158 countries, and more than 25,000 visitors expected during the course of the show. ATM looks set to go down as the most exciting edition in its 29-year history. Despite our comprehensive program of seminars and events, the ITIC ATM Middle East Summit always represents one of ATM's show highlights because it offers valuable opportunity to shine a spotlight on access to project finance. And when it comes to regional tourism investment, I'm pleased to say we have plenty of good news to share. Research conducted by the World Travel and Tourism Council shows that the Middle East travel and tourism sector is on course to generate 246 billion worth of revenue in 2022. Over the longer term, analysts predict that the total contribution of our industry to the GDP of the Middle East countries will reach 486 billion by 2028. Against this backdrop, this year's ITIC ATM Middle East Summit comes as an opportune juncture, giving us all the chance to learn about the latest regional investment opportunities, discover new modes of financing, and network with our peers from around the world. Yesterday, His Excellency Ahmed Bahul Al Falesi, the UAE's Minister of State for Entrepreneurship and SMEs and Chairman of the Emirates Tourism Council, His Excellency Naif Al Fayez, Jordan's Minister of Tourism and Antiquities, the Honourable Edmund Bartlett, Jamaica's Minister of Tourism, and the Honourable Filda Nani Karang, Botswana's Minister of Environment, Natural Resources, Conservation and Tourism, joined Samir Hashmi, Middle East business correspondent at BBC News, for a fascinating conversation about the factors currently driving investment in our sector as part of the ITIC ATM Ministerial Roundtable. But this afternoon, we will engage in in-depth discussions about a broad range of other pertinent topics, including our global economic outlook, air connectivity in the Middle East, the financing and future tourism projects, tourism's power to facilitate the economic integration of women, investment opportunities in Ras Al Khaimah, new and innovative modes of payment, and importance of building tourism resilience to mitigate future crises. It's not every day we get the opportunity to explore the Middle East as a major hub for global tourism investments alongside ministers, policymakers, industry leaders and investors, and I, for one, cannot wait to hear what our industry experts have to say. So without further ado, I'd like to hand you over to Scott Livermore, Chief Economist of Oxford Economics, who will begin today's session with the Global Economic Outlook for 2022. I hope you enjoy this afternoon's summit.
Good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be here speaking to you all again. What I aim to do over the next 15 minutes or so is look at the recovery in travel and tourism in the region to date, assess some of the economic drivers from a macro perspective which are critical to the outlook, and then look at some of the investment conditions, both at the overall level and see how that plays out to the investment forecast we have for the region. Hopefully this higher level macro overview will give you some food for thought, some background for the more detailed, in-depth discussions you'll have later this afternoon. So as we can see by this event, travel and tourism is recovering strongly in the region. It's been led by domestic travel and tourism, which has already reached peaks of 2019 or pre-COVID. This is a significant change for the region. Prior to the crisis, around 55% of travel and tourism was accounted for by the domestic market. During the peak of the crisis, that rose to 80%. While these figures may come down as travel restrictions ease on the back of effective vaccine rollouts, we still expect that to be a permanent change and domestic travel and tourism to be a much more important component of travel and tourism industry going forward. International travel has lagged behind, particularly the mid to long haul market, which is an important component of travel and tourism in the region, but we expect strong growth this year and international visitor numbers to regain pre-crisis levels by 2023. So if you look at some of the components on the market, as I highlighted, international leisure and domestic leisure have increased quickly and responded strongly, particularly being led by domestic leisure, which you can see in the out years is much higher than 2019 levels. Business travel has been slower, but that is likely to recover quickly. As we've seen over the last couple of days, people are desperate to meet again in person. Virtual online activities are an imperfect substitute, and that will drive a recovery. However, the pandemic has shown online activity has a place in our business lives, and it's here to stay. So the recovery will be somewhat slower. Another headwind for international business travel is that it typically, as economies and businesses emerge from recessions and downturns, travel budgets can tend to be constrained. So it may take some time yet for those budgets to return back to normal. But if we look at the economy and start at the very top level about what drives activity in the travel and tourism industry, we're still cautiously optimistic about growth this year. But as you can see on the chart on the left-hand side, our projections for GDP have been declining over the last 6 to 9 months. And that's largely due to supply chain issues. Generating inflation, and as inflation rises, and you can see by the blue line, our inflation forecasts have risen significantly. That squeezes household incomes and weighs on the economy. However, we don't think we stand before a recession. We think the likelihood of recession this year is relatively low. The odds are slightly higher next year. But we remain cautiously optimistic that strong economic growth will continue despite the current headwinds. And the strongest headwinds, or the things people are most concerned about, are now focused on the Russia-Ukraine crisis rather than COVID. The direct economic impacts are most likely to be felt in Europe, particularly Eastern Europe. The impacts in the Middle East are likely to be much less. We have less trade linkages, except for travel and tourism in a few key sectors or few key countries which are likely to be hit by the crisis. Although within that, there are opportunities by remaining open and connected with Russia. The main transmission will be through oil prices. Although oil has fallen back from $140 per barrel in the immediate immediate wake of the invasion, we still expect oil to be above $100 a barrel through much of 2022. This is a factor that accounts for the sharp rise in inflation we see on the right-hand side, and clearly higher oil prices will feed through into higher airfares, and that potentially weighs on travel demand, particularly on long-haul flight, which the region is fairly dependent on. And really this slide captures the risk or the threat posed by higher inflation. On the left-hand side, you see real income growth, so growth adjusted for inflation in the advanced economies. And this year, there's likely to be a significant decline because as inflation spikes up and wages don't adjust, that leads to lower purchasing power. And it's likely the case that discretionary spending such as travel and tourism feel the pinch. But we're cautiously optimistic that households are robust to the higher inflation now, and that's really explained by the right-hand side. During the COVID crisis, we couldn't go out, we couldn't spend money, but in many of the advanced economies, incomes were supported by government policy. So over those 2 years, a significant amount of excess savings has been built up. In Canada and US, it's over 10%, but in a number of other European, Asian economies, it's around 5% of GDP. And I think households are ready to spend again, and they're very keen to travel again, and that's likely to leave demand robust. So what this chart shows on the left-hand side is our latest forecast, the golden bars, the blue bars, and you can see that growth is relatively strong. It's been downgraded as a result of the Russia-Ukraine crisis. There could be a worse scenario, tighter sanctions, blockade of gas in Europe, and that will hit the economies much harder. But we still expect Russia's recession to be avoided. China and the US aren't on the chart. I've put their figures there. So Chinese growth is likely to slow quite a lot this year, largely due to COVID and their zero COVID policy. And US is likely to experience slower growth over the next couple of years. Not so much this year, but next year, as interest rates rise, as the Federal Reserve try to tackle inflation. We expect interest rates in the US to rise by 200 basis points during the course of 2022, which will be quite a significant monetary tightening. Here in the Middle East, we have exchange rate pegs with the dollar, so that tends to mean interest rates move in lockstep with what the Federal Reserve does in the US. So that's going to translate into fairly significant monetary tightening across the region that feeds through to borrowing costs and likely to squeeze back some borrowing for investment decisions. But it should be noted, as highlighted on the right-hand side, the level of interest rates that we will reach in 2023, when we are kind of normalized, is much lower than we've seen in previous periods. So it's still much lower than pre-crisis levels. So the tightening will dampen credit demand, but it shouldn't choke it off too significantly. And against the background of rising costs, we're still seeing a situation where profit margins across the world are relatively high. At the same time, corporates have accumulated significant amounts of cash, and that means they should be in good financial health, ready to invest when they have the confidence to do so. So the financial backdrop to investment remains robust globally, and that bodes well for eventually for investment in those economies and FDI flows around the world, which the countries in the region are trying to compete for. However, a big thing that investors do not like is uncertainty, and the outlook is uncertain at the moment. This is around an index of confidence for investors in the S&P, and you can see by looking at the red lines that confidence is at a very low level, and caution will persist until confidence level rises. But here in the Middle East, I think we're less exposed to those uncertainties, those private sector dynamics. The public sector, the governments of the region, are very much driving the non-oil growth in the short term. We've emerged from a situation where there's a lot of fiscal consolidation when oil prices plummeted. Now budgets have been consolidated, governments across the region are spending really quite aggressively to support the economy. And that's across all sectors to achieve their growth and diversification policies. This isn't just Ministry of Finance spending, some of it's off budget, so you can see the Public Investment Fund in Saudi Arabia is making a significant contribution to growth. As a result, I think the GCC is going to be one of 2 regions that will see an acceleration in growth this year. The other factor that will be important pushing growth higher in the region is increasing oil production as OPEC Plus increases its production quotas. But overall, it's a relatively positive message for the region and a good reason to think the region will fare better than elsewhere in the world. But how will that filter through to travel and tourism? As I said, travel and tourism is important for growth and diversification. Traditionally, we've seen greater investment in travel and tourism in the economy as a whole, as this chart shows. In the short term, investment conditions are challenging. We're still emerging from crisis, there's still uncertainty. But going forward, given the importance of travel and tourism to growth and diversification agendas, we're likely to see a real significant ramping up in investment. This will be partly public sector policies, giga projects in Saudi, be it NEOM, Red Sea project, Qiddiya. We see Dubai developing its attractions and expanding out to Hatta, and across the Emirates and other Gulf regions, similar investments are going on. This creates opportunities for public-private partnerships, but also in the wider ecosystem to benefit the inbound visitors. Significant to the investment we've seen are this major international events, Expo, the upcoming World Cup. That has generated development of lots of capacity. You can see here that Qatar and the UAE are 2 of the economies that have returned closest to pre-pandemic levels, large part in thanks to those large significant events. And those significant events and the attractions, including examples such as ATM, really show that people want to travel. And I think increasingly going forward, the blending of business and leisure will be an important opportunity and an important avenue of growth for travel and tourism, given, especially for longer haul flights, people are likely to take such flights less frequently and look for longer stays. What this chart shows is the increase in hotels, rooms, so the capacity. You can see the growth in Qatar, the UAE, associated with the World Cup and Expo 2020. So that's really increased the capacity. And once those events are over, there needs to be a wider set of attractions, tourist sector activities to justify and support the extra visitor numbers. Saudi Arabia, prior to the crisis, saw less or slower increase in available hotel rooms. But I think that's likely to change over the forecast period as the different tenets of Vision 2030 are implemented over the next few years. So to wrap up, travel and tourism is important for the economy, particularly so in the region. Given its importance to diversification strategies, it's likely that its share of the economy will increase further over the forecast period. And I think there are significant upsides to the shares and the numbers shown in this chart. We only include actual announced investments or announced plans. And I think it's highly likely that there will be developments and initiatives over and above that we include in our forecasts. So there is significant chances that the outturns will be higher and stronger than we include in these charts. So hopefully that's provided useful background. If we have time, I'm more than happy to take a couple of questions related to the economic outlook. So if anyone has any questions, please make yourself known. Okay, so China is going through a relatively tough time now in growth, and clearly with the COVID restrictions, travel is limited. We think that's relatively temporary. It's lockdown conditions, a bit like we've seen before. So we do expect China to come back to higher growth rates over the next couple of years, so 5.5 from a GDP perspective. They're not the rates we were used to 10, 15 years ago, but the important thing to remember is the economy is so much bigger now in terms of dollars, spending power, the income level, and the individuals you expect and would like to come and visit the Middle East. We're still likely to see a significant contribution from the Chinese. Okay, if there are no further questions, I'll hand back to Nick, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the afternoon.